Everyone told me the same thing. Save 10% of what you earn. That's it. That's the whole plan. And I believed it for years. Then I actually did the math. And I realized that advice was incomplete. Not necessarily wrong, but definitely insufficient. My name is Paper Profit. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a guy who got tired of advice that sounds right but doesn't work. Let's talk about the 10% rule, where it came from, why it made sense once, and why it needs context today. So the 10% rule isn't new. It goes back decades. The idea is simple. Earn $100, save 10, live on 90. Do that your whole career, invest it, retire fine. Clean, simple, easy to remember. That's why it survived. That's also why it's misunderstood, because simple advice doesn't explain the conditions required to make it work. You have to figure that out manually. And most people never got the memo. Let me tell you where I was a few years ago. I was making around $50,000 a year before taxes. That felt okay to me. Not great, not terrible. Just okay. I kept hearing the 10% rule. Save $5,000 a year. That's the goal. So I tried. Let's run the actual numbers on that life. $50,000 a year gross means roughly $39,000 to $41,000 after federal and state taxes, depending on where you live. Let's call it $40,000 take-home to keep it clean. 10% of gross is $5,000 a year, about $415 a month. Okay, now let's build out the actual budget. Rent, the national median for a one-bedroom apartment right now, is around $1,600 a month. In a lot of cities, it's $2,000 or more. But let's use $1,600. That's $19,200 a year, just rent. That's already almost half your take-home gone. Now add utilities: electric, gas, water, internet. Realistic total is somewhere around $250 to $300 a month. Let's say $270. That's another $3,240 a year. Car. If you're in most of America, you need one. Average car payment right now is around $700 a month. That's if you financed something relatively modest. Add insurance on top. Average car insurance is about $160 a month nationally. So transportation is already eating $860 a month. That's $10,320 a year. But here is the hard truth. That car payment is a choice, not a necessity. Spending 17% of your gross income on a car payment breaks the budget before you start. Groceries. The USDA puts moderate cost food spending for a single adult at around $350 to $400 a month. Let's use $360. That's $4,320 a year. Health insurance. If your job covers it, great. A lot of jobs pass part of the premium to you. Average employee contribution is around $120 to $150 a month, even with employer coverage. Let's say $130. That's another $1,560 a year. Phone. Around $80 to $100 a month for a basic plan. Let's say $90. That's $1,080 a year. Now let's add it up. Rent, $19,200. Utilities, $3,240. Groceries, $4,320. Health insurance, $1,560. Phone, $1,080. Total, $39,720. Your take-home was $40,000. You have $280 left for the entire year. That's $23 a month. For everything else, clothing, doctor copays, haircuts, cleaning supplies, any social life at all, any emergency, and your 10% savings, there's no room for it. But not because the math is impossible, because the allocation is broken. This is what I mean when I say simple advice ignores reality. The 10% rule assumes you have margin. It assumes that after your basic costs, there's a cushion. And for a lot of Americans right now, there isn't one. This isn't an accident. Wages grew slowly for decades while rent, cars, healthcare, and education grew fast. The gap between what a median income earner makes and what basic life costs has been closing for 30 years. Nobody updated the savings rule to match. So let me show you what the numbers actually suggest you need to save. Most retirement calculators will tell you that to retire somewhat comfortably at 65 after starting at 25, you need to save somewhere between 15 and 20% of your gross income. Not 10, 15 to 20. That's if you start at 25 and invest consistently. If you start at 30, some models push that number closer to 25%. If you start at 35, you're looking at 30% or more to hit the same target. 10% was always the floor, not the goal. And even the floor assumed you started young, had stable employment, no major debt, and low housing costs relative to income. That's not the average American in 2025. Okay, so what do you actually do with this information? First, stop measuring in percent. Seriously. 10% of 50,000 is very different from 10% of 90,000. The advice works fine if you earn enough. It fails if you don't. So instead of asking, what percent am I saving? Ask a different question. Ask, what does my actual monthly budget look like line by line? Write it down. Not an estimate. Actual numbers from your last 2 months of spending. That alone will show you more than any rule of thumb ever will. Second, look at the big three: housing, transportation, and food. These 3 categories alone make up the majority of most people's spending. If your budget is broken, the problem is almost always sitting in one of those 3 places, specifically housing. A common guideline is to keep housing under 30% of gross income. On $50,000 gross, that's around $1,250 a month. The national median rent is already higher than that in most cities, which means a lot of people are starting the month already over budget before they buy a single thing. If you can bring housing down, even by a few $100s a month, the math shifts dramatically. Here's what I actually changed in my own situation. I moved to a cheaper apartment when my lease ended. I kept my paid-off older car instead of upgrading. I focused on increasing my income through skills and negotiation. I started putting away whatever was left at the end of the month, even when it was small. And I stopped measuring myself against the 10% rule, because that rule wasn't written for my income, my city, or my decade. It was written for a world where one income comfortably covered a mortgage, a car, a family, and a pension on the side. That world existed. It just doesn't describe most people's reality right now. The rule didn't fail because you're bad at saving. The rule failed because it stopped fitting the numbers. But the numbers don't care about the rule, and the system doesn't care about your feelings. It cares about outcomes. The outcome the system is built around is that most people don't save enough. That creates customers for debt products, financial products, and retirement anxiety products for decades. Knowing that doesn't fix your budget overnight, but it means you can stop blaming yourself for not hitting a number that was never designed to be realistic for your situation, and stop blaming the system for choices you can control. The useful thing is the math. Run your actual numbers. Find the biggest line item. Move that needle if you can. Save whatever fits. Get the match. Build the $1,000 cushion. Then go from there. That's it. That's all there is. No secret, no shortcut, just the actual numbers in your actual life. I'm Paper Profit. I'll see you in the next one.